37. When one makes two. Dressing up. Variety is the spice of life, or so it is said. Maybe that saying leads a few to change their identities. More often the change has evasion in mind, perhaps because of bigamy charges, evasion of tax or police in pursuit. Avoiding embarrassment can motivate changes in names. Parents, take care when naming your young. Some changes are turnings on pathways to fame. Norma Jean became Marilyn Monroe. Or, for that matter, they occur after seeing the light. Bound to Damascus, Saul became Paul. Yet double lives become the outcome for some, and such lives may spell some logical trouble. David delights in variety. He delights so much that he often dresses in a womanly fashion as Lady Davinia, playing the lady role exceptionally well. When out in public, and not dressed as Davinia, he is masculine and mean. Dave, so rough and so tough. The girls swoon at Dave the tough, yet are unmoved by Davinia the cool. Men dismiss Dave as Jack the lad, but yearn for kisses from Davinia so cool, so elegant. David's changes in persona always take place in private. People, if observing his apartment, often see Dave, dressed in the usual leathers, disappearing indoors. Sometime later, Lady Davinia appears, her long blonde hair shimmering, dress sparkling and stilettos so sharp. Were the Tensellis view of time correct, then there should be no puzzle about events existing in the present. They are as real whether they exist in the present or past or future. With the Tensellis view, though, we confront different puzzles. We may wonder why it is that we cannot perceive, see, hear, smell, those events that are existing further along the before-after sequence, in either direction, in what we think of as the past and the future. There are, of course, answers, even acceptable answers. Causes operate in one direction in the before-after series, events before cause events after, and not vice versa. Events after you're reading this page, events, in the future, cannot cause events before them. That is why, even though those future events exist, they cannot affect us now. That is why we cannot, for example, see which football team is winning next week. What of events that occurred before your reading of this page? On the Tensellis view, they too exist. And, in fact, we do perceive some of those events that are existing in the past. Think of the spatial distance of planets and stars. Given that light does not travel from A to B instantaneously, the changes that we see are ones that occurred at points in the time dimension well before our seeing them. They caused our seeing them. Indeed, if we think that A's causing B always takes some time, however short, then we are always experiencing things that have already happened, that are, at least a little bit, in the past. The biggest problem with the Tensellis view of time is its failure to do justice to change. The cooking goose is changing color, changing from being raw to cooked. This is not merely a variation akin to the way in which the goose is spatially variable, with skin on the outside, bones within. Spatially, a cake may be chocolate on the outside and cream inside, but the cake is not thereby undergoing a change. Think of how different the chocolate changing into cream is from there simply being chocolate next to cream. Returning to the goose, the change as it cooks seems to make essential reference to tenses. The goose was raw, but will be well done. Yet, if we are back with time understood as involving tenses, involving change, we are back with our initial puzzle. Many things, it seems, are true of Davinia, yet not of Dave. Men open car doors for Davinia, but never for Dave. On particular occasions, Dave, not Davinia, enters the home. Later Davinia, not Dave, exits. We may add complexity by commenting about David, but allow him to drop out of the picture, until required again. Consider how we may reason. Premise 1. Girls make dates with Dave. Premise 2. Dave is Davinia. Conclusion. Girls make dates with Davinia. The two premises are readily accepted as true, yet we, even we in the know, may well resist accepting the conclusion. After all, girls do not really date Davinia. Yet if they do not, we hit the puzzle that follows. As Dave and Davinia are one individual, how can some things true of Dave not be true of Davinia? We may have wanted to ask, how can some things be true of one, yet not of the other? But, while we have the one, we lack the other. They are one and the same person, identified by two names. If we have two names for the same item and know which item that is, we can surely substitute one name for the other, without altering the truth of what we say. Lewis Carroll was Charles Dodgson. It is a truth that Dodgson died in 1898, so it must surely also be true that Carroll died in the same year. One line of thought, the identity line, stresses that the same things really are true of Dave and Davinia. The line needs, then, to explain why we tend mistakenly to think otherwise. Another line, the difference line, accepts that there really are some differences between what is true of Dave and of Davinia, and that is because we misunderstand use of the names. According to one difference line, everything that persists is really a sequence of temporal stages. Why it is true that girls swoon at Dave and not at Davinia is because the temporal stages differ. The Dave stages differ from the Davinia stages. In premise 1 and the conclusion, we are not directly referring to the same individual, but to a person's different stages in time, a Dave stage in 1, a Davinia stage in the conclusion. In criticism of the difference line, is a continuing life really just a sequence of temporal stages? Maybe it is, when natural and significant developments occur. Yes, the tadpole is a temporal stage of a creature that has the later stage of frog. David, though, keeps switching between Dave and Davinia. The temporal stages of Dave lack continuity. For that matter, David, the generator of the persona changes, would also need to be fitted into the temporal tail. The difference line demands linguistic juggling. It is not obviously true that girls swoon at temporal stages of a man. More accurately, it is not obviously true that female stages swoon at male stages. Maybe, swooning needs understanding afresh. Further, perhaps girls speak to rough-voiced Dave on a mobile, while peering through the apartment's curtains, seeing Davinia on the phone. That is, David is dressed as Davinia, yet speaking as Dave. The temporal stage is the same, yet both Dave and Davinia are present. The difference line also needs to explain why premise 2, Dave is Davinia, seems true. Perhaps, is sometimes needs special rendering as, is a temporal stage of the same person as. Yes, much juggling is required, as seen earlier, with Heraclitus not stepping into the same river twice. The difference line is problematic. How fares the identity line? This line keeps faith with the thought that Dave and Davinia really are the same individual. So why do we make different assessments about what is true of them? Maybe the conclusion, girls make dates with Davinia, is true, but we resist assent because assent would mislead people unaware that Davinia is David, and that David is appearing as Dave, whenever girls date him. Here is an analogy. I truthfully announce that the Queen appeared on television and was sober. You wrongly conclude that she is not usually sober. Why would anyone mention her sobriety, unless it was unsual? Even though what I say does not logically imply that the Queen is usually drunk, my comment may convey an alcoholic royalty. My comment carries a conversational implicature. A little similarly, we hesitate in saying that girls date Davinia because we realize how, in many contexts, to assert it would mislead. Here, of course, we have already exposed David's lifestyle, so, here, asserting our conclusion that girls date Davinia should not mislead. More explanations, though, are needed, and more problems duly arise. We want to say that girls do not date Dave as Davinia. Girls make dates with Davinia, not as Davinia, but as Dave. Maybe premise 1 is truthfully saying, or implying, that girls make dates with someone personified as Dave, with the conclusion read as saying that they make dates with someone personified as Davinia. That line seems to make the strange commitment that girls make dates with personifications or aspects. Can you date a persona or aspect? If David's cross-dressing ways are revealed, girls may truthfully say, wow, so sometimes Dave is dressed as Davinia, a woman. But that does not amount to saying that David personified as Dave is sometimes dressed as David personified as Davinia. David, when personified as Dave, certainly is not dressed as Davinia. The above approaches to the cross-dressing puzzle generate more and more difficulties. Perhaps we fail to see the wood for the trees, even though, dare I say, the wood is identical with a collection of trees. The puzzle has arisen because we have two different names and a story that provides two different sets of thoughts and pictures, one set associated with one name, the other set with the other name. We hold two separate files on David, for we know about the double life. Which file we handle depends upon which name is being used. Do girls make dates with Davinia, yes or no? Resist being bullied into giving a yes or a no. Let our answer be, in a way, yes, and in a way, no. Which file, dossier, cluster, is in play, see page 408. Did you meet your husband before you married him? Yes. So, he was your husband when you met him? No. Let us try the question again. Did you meet your husband before you married him? Well, no. So, you just went and married a perfect stranger, you poor thing. I'm so sorry. 38. Pin dropping. Things may be so quiet that you can hear a pin drop, but, for that hearing to take place, you need not merely a pin and the drop, but also a conscious observer to hear. Such a thought should silence the wonder of whether, when trees fall in a forest, there is any sound if no one is present to hear. No observer, no sound, may be the principle. If so, the universe is a fine and quiet place, when lacking conscious creatures. Recording apparatus, if magically existing before creatures came to be, would still register the vibrations of those forest snaps, crackles, and thuds, but, on playback, there would be no sounds to play back, if still no creatures to hear. There is no good reason to stop at sounds. If no one is present, salt, it seems, lacks any taste, roses lack the scent of roses, and, as for the colors of rainbow, could anything be colored, if no one exists to perceive the color? Such considerations led a certain Bishop Berkeley, a powerful reasoner of the early 18th century, to argue that for anything to exist at all, there must be observers, perceivers. To be is to be perceived, was the good bishop's mantra, well, part of his mantra. Perceivers are also beings and yet are unperceived, being not perceivable bodies but minds or spirits, so the mantra in fullness is to be perceived or to perceive, with perceiving, covering the 5 senses, seeing, touching, hearing, smelling, tasting, as well as thinking. In speedy summary, material things, themselves no spirits or minds, cannot exist if understood as items unperceived, well, thus argued the bishop. What we think of as material objects, tables, chairs, mince pies and mountains, are just collections of qualities, of colors, shapes, weights, tastes, softness or hardness, and such qualities depend on perceivers perceiving. To one perceiver, the bath water feels hot, to another, tepid. The mince pie is salty to one, sweet to another. From one angle, the table looks oval, from another, circular, and so forth. These physical objects are not matter, existing independently of mind, a repugnance, a contradiction, according to Berkeley, but collections of ideas, that is of mind-dependent perceptions. There need be no worry, though, about tables and chairs popping out of existence when we leave the room, and the room popping out too, and popping back upon our return. We need not fear for the existence of unseen bodily organs and the movements of legs and arms that come and go out of existence, depending on whether they are perceived, be it inwardly or outwardly. There need be no fear, for Berkeley ushers in God, the greatest perceiver, upon whose mind all objects depend. God is all-seeing and always seeing. Thus came forth the limerick. There was a young man who said, God must find it exceedingly odd that this tree I see, should continue to be when there's no one about in the quad. And the divine reassuring reply, Dear sir, I am always about in the quad. And that's why the tree will continue to be since observed by yours faithfully, God. To answer Berkeley's puzzle, let us resist refuge in God. How may we combat Berkeley's position that tables and chairs, mountains and mince pies are mind-dependent collections of ideas? Are there sounds in a forest when no one is present to hear? Can things exist when there are no observers? To quell Berkeley's argument, we should distinguish between the ideas that we have, the mind-dependent entities, and the mind-independent entities that cause those ideas. We sometimes conflate the two because of ambiguous language. When we speak of sounds, are we speaking of experiences or of vibrations in the air? When we speak of the pie being hot, are we speaking of hot sensations or of the pie's molecular motions that cause the sensations? Experiences differ from what the experiences are experiences of. Experiences are mind-dependent, the vibrations and molecular motions are not. The above is an answer to Berkeley, but Berkeley has a reply. What are the vibrations or motions or qualities that allegedly are distinct from our experiences? One person experiences the water as hot, another as tepid. Which is it? Look at the sky then without rose-tinted glasses, its color seemingly changes. What qualities do the water, the sky, the mince pies and so on really have? And what do we know about vibrations and molecular motions, save how our senses are affected? The general point is that our experiences, we casually believe, result from an interplay between the objects and our perceptual apparatus. Our perceptual apparatus contributes to what we take the objects, really, to be. A cat's apparatus gives it different experiences, a Martian's apparatus, were there to be such creatures, different too. How can we possibly reach out to anything other than our experiences? According to Berkeley, we perceive just ideas, experiences, and they are mind-dependent. According to others, behind the veil of ideas exist the material or physical objects that cause the ideas. As there is no possibility of lifting the veil even ever so slightly, Berkeley's stance is that talk of such objects behind a veil is idle talk. Mind you, as mentioned, Berkeley does end up with something behind the veil, God. We continue here, though, without God. The line of argument above can reach a radical conclusion, for my knowledge of other people is based on nothing more than my experiences, so, I am also unjustified in believing other people exist, save as ideas dependent on my mind. I could land in the position of believing that only I and my ideas exist, solipsism. Here, let us return to common sense. Common sense can often help. Berkeley had us seeing, touching, hearing, smelling, tasting, ideas. That immediately set us on the wrong path. The particular senses need to be treated differently from each other, but, risking the general, we often accept, as a matter of common sense, that we see and touch, and so forth, physical objects. We see the cat, smell the cat, stroke the cat, even accidentally kick the cat. When we see the cat, we have visual sensation, but we do not see the sensations. The sensations, the ideas, are what, arguably, we have when seeing the cat, though we may wonder about the relationship between the cat and those sensations. If the cat is white, we have sensations of whiteness, depending on lighting conditions. Of course, such visual sensations are lacking when no one is around to see the cat. Does that mean that the cat lacks a white color when unseen? Well, it depends what is meant by white. One quick solution is to argue that an item is white if the following is true. Were it to be seen by typical human beings, or maybe discriminating experts, under agreed, normal, conditions, then the perceivers would have certain visual sensations, namely those of whiteness. Is that visual sensation in the cat? No. Is the cat white? Yes. The approach, details to one side, seeks to understand qualities such as colors and shapes, tastes and smells, as dispositional, that is, they are understood in terms of which sensations would occur if. When we say salt is soluble, we do not mean that it is dissolving right now, what we mean is that, were it to be placed in water, then it would dissolve. When we say salt is white, we do not mean that there are experiences of a whiteness right now, if no one is looking. What we mean, or at least imply, is that, were it to be viewed under normal conditions, then certain visual sensations would occur. We return to the forest bereft of sentient beings. The winds howl, the trees crash and the lightning is followed by thunder. Were there to be humans present, they would hear those things. So, just as oceans and mountains, shapes and sizes, densities and durations surely existed before sentient beings existed, we should acquiesce in accepting that the deserts were colored, oceans were salty, and forests were filled with sounds. Yet does that sound quite right?